Hey everyone, this is Jonathan Morensky, and today we are here to discuss a problematic issue and issues that arise from the show You on Netflix. So essentially, You on the surface might not seem like something that has any sort of issue or problem associated with it, but this is the whole point of the assignment, so I'd like to debunk that idea. And it's a show that I absolutely love watching. I love psychological thrillers, so I just thought that this would be cool to take the opportunity to dive into something that I personally love. And when I look at it, I really do see, like, oh, there's some themes in here that racially that could be improved on. So essentially, the directors of You are one man and one woman, and they're both white. So the premise of the show is basically a man named Joe, who is a white man, has these nice, cute little mannerisms, and meets this one woman named Beck in the first season. And it slowly, at first, is a generous and gentle interaction between the two of them, but then it slowly becomes this toxic. He starts becoming obsessive over her, and it really transcends into stalking instead of just the first cute interaction that they first had. He's a bookstore worker in New York, and she is a writer. Beck works as a graduate student, studying under someone. She's a TA, and that's how she's paying a lot of her rent. So she has a friend named Peach in that season that essentially helps her out. And the whole premise basically really just relies on the fact that Joe each season is attached to this girl, this woman, and gets too caught up in himself and just starts to go berserk and does things. And then eventually Beck ends up in a cage, a storage unit for books it's kept really cold to keep the books preserved. And he ends up killing her and finds a way to fake it so that she committed suicide. And at the end, it looks like she committed suicide, and he gets off hands free. And then in the next season, he moves to LA. So that's the premise, essentially, of the show. It's also an adaptation of a 2014 novel, which to me will get into one of the problems later of the show when it comes to adaptations of any sort of not literature through a movie or TV show. So my main problems here are people of color in general. We'll get to the black people part in a bit, but people in color in general, like Peach is a person of color. Her race is different than just being white. And she essentially is used very early on. She's seen as the bitch, the one who isn't kind, and all the white people in the show tend to be very portrayed like these godly people in a white space where, we'll get to beauty a little bit later, but basically, like, there can be no wrong done in terms of behavior from white people. And Peach was killed as an operational unit to keep the show going, kind of like how in critiques of film, in critiques of women in film, it's almost like the woman is always used as a passive agent in romantic films, which this is also a romantic film slash TV show, where the person of color is killed and she's a woman, is to keep the man's story going, because it is, in the sense, it is his story. He's the one chasing the woman. So my other issue with this is the idea of beauty and whiteness that we've talked about in class, really, really portrays itself here. If you really think about it, beautiful blonde writer in New York and beautiful white male bookstore worker, very humble, and it seems innocent in the surface, but why is a black woman not a part of the equation of love either season? That was my main issue with it. The directors, like I said earlier, are both white, which can lend itself to, it's like, well, does that lend itself to why maybe white people are the standard of beauty? If, like, they're internalizing white supremacy and whiteness, the directors, they could possibly be portraying that idea of what beautiful is onto the show. And that's what I feel like a lot of the show is them portraying this idea of whiteness being the standard of beauty and not color, onto the show. Also, just not a huge representation of black people in general in the show, and this is a problem representation is a problem in the film industry, in Congress, in political areas. We see it everywhere. Um, and I say representation instead of diversity because representation implies more of that we already have the people out there that are talented and will and able to fulfill these roles. Um, it's not just there's more talented white people in the film industry and all these cop outs that we like to use. It's really no, like we try, and the only reason diversity is a lot of times used or representation in film used is to get ahead financially in the film industry. It's not so that we can actually genuinely be strongly interested in having people. Um, my fifth point was why not the woman being sought out, in Beck, the white woman in this case? Why not it be a black woman as the idea of beauty and the thing that the guy wants to be chased? My thought on this was that maybe because of the history of black women being slaves that we've talked about with Bell Hooks, I was like thinking, oh, maybe because Bell Hooks says this, the idea, and like she reports the history of black people being slaves, maybe the thought was, oh, like a black woman being the target of stalking would almost over sexualize her like she was in slavery. I don't think the directors would have gone that far to think like that. I think really what is going on here, to get back to the main point, is the problem here is simply whiteness is the idealized standard of beauty. And we see it on a lot of places, Instagram models, shows, politics, even in the black community, there's a standard of beauty, like mixed girls versus black girls. And I think really what the show comes down to is the underlying problem is that standard of beauty. And that's what I want to leave you guys with. And thank you so much for listening. And I really feel like this is a cool opportunity. And I hope to see y'all soon.